Nobody taught you this in school. Not because they forgot. Because if you understood it, really understood it, the people above you would lose something they can't afford to lose. Their advantage. There is a field of study so threatening to the social order that the academic world spent decades pretending it didn't exist. Psychologists avoided it. Philosophers danced around it. And the people who actually used it, they never wrote it down. It doesn't have a clean name, but it has a pattern. And once you see the pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. In boardrooms, in politics, in your own family, in the way certain people walk into a room and leave with exactly what they came for, without ever raising their voice. They call it dark psychology. And right now, without knowing it, it is either working on you or working for you. There is no neutral position. Here's the question nobody asks. Not, what is dark psychology? That's surface level. The real question is, why do some people seem to move through the world like the rules don't apply to them? You've seen it. The guy who shouldn't be in the room, but keeps getting invited back. The woman who says nothing, but everyone follows her lead. The leader who is almost never the smartest person present, but always ends up in control of the outcome. They're not lucky. They're not just charismatic. And they're definitely not playing the same game you were taught to play. They are operating from a completely different psychological framework. And here's what makes that so interesting and so dangerous. Most of what they're doing is invisible to the untrained eye. It looks like confidence. It looks like leadership. It looks like people skills. But underneath, it's calculated, deliberate, and disturbingly effective. So today, we're going deep. We are going to break down what dark psychology actually is, not the clickbait version, not the Reddit thread version, but the real psychological machinery underneath it. We're going to look at how it shows up in power structures, and then, and this is the part most people never get to, we're going to talk about what it means for you, whether you want to protect yourself from it, or whether you want to understand how the most powerful people in the world think. Stay with me, because the first thing you need to unlearn is the definition you already have. Section A, what dark psychology actually is. Most people hear dark psychology and they think manipulation, lying, cult leaders, sociopaths. That's the surface. And like most surface-level understanding, it's not wrong. It's just incomplete. Dark psychology, at its core, is the study of the predatory aspects of human behavior, the tactics, patterns, and psychological mechanisms that people use, consciously or unconsciously, to influence, control, or dominate others. The word dark doesn't mean evil, necessarily. It means covert, hidden, operating below the level of conscious awareness, yours, and sometimes even theirs. Dr. Robert Cialdini spent decades researching influence and identified 6 core principles: reciprocity, commitment, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity. He called these weapons of influence, not tools, weapons, because in the wrong hands, they don't persuade, they override rational thought. But here's what Cialdini was careful about. He was studying the mechanics of persuasion in controlled settings. He was studying the light end of the spectrum. Dark psychology lives at the other end. It starts where normal influence ends and crosses into territory that deliberately bypasses your ability to choose freely. Think about that. Your brain processes over 11 million bits of information per second. But consciously, you process about 40. The rest? Your unconscious handles it, using shortcuts, patterns, emotional signals, and assumptions built over a lifetime. Dark psychology doesn't target the 40. It targets the 11 million. And nobody told you that was even possible. Section B, the 3 core mechanisms. There are 3 primary psychological mechanisms that form the engine of dark psychological influence. Every tactic, every specific move maps back to at least one of these. The first is framing. Framing is not what you say. It's what you make someone believe is true before you say anything at all. Here's a simple example. Studies show that if a doctor tells a patient, "This surgery has a 90% survival rate," the patient almost always consents. If the same doctor says, "This surgery has a 10% mortality rate," significantly more patients refuse. Same surgery, same odds. Completely different psychological response. At the individual level, this is cognitive bias. At the power level, it's architecture. The people who control the frame control the conversation, control the narrative, control what options seem available and which ones seem insane. Every negotiation begins before anyone opens their mouth. The person who walks in having already defined the terms, the expectations, and the emotional context of the room has already won. This is why the most powerful people in any room say the least. They've already done the framing work before they arrived. The second mechanism is emotional leverage. The human brain is not a logic machine. I know we like to think it is. But neuroscientist Antonio Damasio discovered something extraordinary, studying patients with damage to the emotional centers of their brain. These patients had full cognitive function, perfect IQ, perfect memory, perfect reasoning. But they couldn't make decisions. Without emotion, the brain literally cannot prioritize. It cannot choose. Dark psychology exploits this at a fundamental level. Emotional leverage means understanding what someone fears, what they desire, what makes them feel seen or invisible, and using that as a steering wheel. This is why gaslighting works, why coercive control works, why propaganda works. It's not about convincing the rational mind. It's about creating an emotional climate in which certain choices feel inevitable. You ever wonder why intelligent people end up in abusive relationships? Or why smart voters keep supporting politicians who consistently fail them? Or why competent employees freeze when a specific person enters the room? It's not stupidity. It's emotional leverage being applied to the right psychological pressure points. The third mechanism is identity manipulation. This is the deepest and the most dangerous. Your identity, your sense of who you are, is not as fixed as you think. It is constantly being constructed in real time through the feedback you receive from your environment, from other people, from the roles you inhabit. Social psychologist Henri Tajfel proved that humans will defend their group identity, even when it works against their personal interest, even when the group membership is arbitrary and meaningless, even when they were randomly assigned to it 5 minutes ago. We don't just have an identity. We perform our identity constantly, and we make choices that are consistent with who we believe we are, not always with what's actually good for us. Dark psychology, at its most sophisticated, targets identity directly. When you hear, "I wouldn't expect someone like you to understand this," that's identity manipulation. When someone says, "You're not the kind of person who backs down," right before asking you to do something reckless, that's identity manipulation. When a system rewards you for identifying as a certain kind of worker or consumer or voter, and then uses that identification to predict and control your behavior, that is identity manipulation at scale. And here's the thing. These three mechanisms, framing, emotional leverage, and identity manipulation, are not used by cartoon villains. They're not used exclusively by narcissists and sociopaths. They are used by advertisers, by politicians, by managers, by parents, by partners, by entire governments. The question has never been whether these tools exist. The question is who is using them and who is being used. Section C, how dark psychology scales into power. Now here's where it gets structural. Because individual manipulation is one thing, but what happens when these mechanisms get embedded into systems? This is where most conversations about dark psychology stop, and it's exactly where the conversation should begin. Robert Greene, whether you agree with his ethics or not, spent years documenting the behavioral patterns of historically powerful people: kings, generals, billionaires, cult leaders, political architects. His core finding was not that powerful. People are smarter. It's that they understand one thing that most people never consciously grasp. Power is not given. It is taken and maintained through the control of perception, not reality. Perception. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513, 500 years ago. And the core insight was this: a leader does not need to be just. They need to appear just. A leader does not need to be competent. They need to seem indispensable. And that hasn't changed. Think about every powerful institution you've ever interacted with: your employer, your government, your religion, every significant relationship you've been in. Ask yourself, how much of what you believed about those structures was based on direct, verified experience? And how much was based on framing, emotional climate, and identity? The answer for most people is uncomfortable, because if you're honest, most of what you know about the world was told to you by systems that had a specific interest in how you saw it. That's not conspiracy. That's just how power maintains itself. And here's the brutal part. This doesn't work because people are stupid. It works because people are human. We need to belong. We need to feel safe. We need our identities to be coherent. We need the world to make sense. Dark psychology, at scale, exploits every one of those needs simultaneously. So, now you know what it is. Now you understand the mechanisms. Now you see how it scales. Here's what you actually do with that. Because information without application is just entertainment. And I didn't build this channel to entertain you. I built it to upgrade you. The first thing you do is audit your environment. Not in a paranoid way, in a precise way. Start asking a simple question in every interaction. Who benefits from me believing this? Not, is this true or false? Not, do I like this person or not? Who benefits from me believing this? That single question is a knife that cuts through most manipulation, because manipulation, at its core, requires that you never ask it. When your employer tells you the company is a family, who benefits from you believing that? When media tells you the most important thing happening in the world is happening over there, who benefits from your attention being over there? When someone in your life tells you that you're being too sensitive every time you express a legitimate concern, who benefits from you doubting your own perception? Audit the benefit trail, not obsessively, habitually. The second thing you do is protect your frame. Remember, the frame is the battlefield before the battle. If you've already accepted someone else's framing of a situation, you've already lost something, even before a word is exchanged. Practically, This means slow down before you respond. Not dramatically, just consciously. When someone presents you with a choice that feels urgent, recognize that urgency itself is almost always a framing device. Real choices rarely expire in the next 5 minutes. Artificial urgency is a tool designed to shut down deliberation. When you feel emotionally activated in a conversation, recognize that emotion as information, not instruction. Your anger, fear, or guilt might be valid, or it might be a response being deliberately triggered. Don't act on it until you've separated those two possibilities. The third thing, and this is the one nobody wants to hear, is that you need to understand these mechanisms well enough to use them ethically, not to manipulate people, but because naivety is not a virtue when the people around you are not naive. If you don't understand how framing works, you cannot build a compelling vision. You cannot lead. You cannot negotiate. If you don't understand emotional leverage, you cannot build genuine connection, because connection is emotional resonance. The difference is intent. Are you creating emotional impact because you care about the other person's outcome, or because you're engineering their behavior to serve yours? If you don't understand identity, you cannot influence culture. You cannot build a brand. You cannot inspire a team. The same psychological machinery that can be used to control can be used to liberate if you understand it deeply enough and your intent is honest. That's the real payoff of understanding dark psychology. Not becoming dangerous, becoming clear about who you are, clear about what's being done to you, clear about what you're willing to do and why. And clarity in a world full of deliberate confusion is the most dangerous thing a person can have. I want to be straight with you for a second. This is not comfortable material. I know that. And I know some of you are sitting with it in ways that are personal. Maybe you're recognizing a relationship, a situation, a system you've been inside of for years. That feeling is real, and it's worth sitting with. The reason I make content like this is not because I think you're a victim. I don't. I think you're someone who was handed a map that was drawn to serve someone else's destination. And you've been walking it faithfully, wondering why the terrain doesn't match what you were promised. Most people never question the map. You did, or you wouldn't be here. That matters. Understanding dark psychology is not about becoming cynical. It's not about trusting no one, seeing everything as manipulation, becoming cold and calculated. It's about becoming the kind of person who chooses, consciously, deliberately, from a position of real understanding, how to move through the world. Because the alternative is being moved by your employer, by your environment, by the media, by the people in your life who understand these mechanisms, whether consciously or intuitively, better than you do. You have a mind that is capable of seeing through this. You have the capacity to develop the awareness required to protect yourself and build genuine power in your life. Not power over people, power over your own outcomes. That's the whole game. Here's the loop we opened at the start. Why do some people seem to move through the world like the rules don't apply to them? Now, it's not luck. It's not charisma. It's not intelligence in the traditional sense. It's psychological literacy. They understand how people think. They understand how decisions are actually made. Not how we tell ourselves they're made, but how the brain actually processes reality. And they operate from that understanding in every room, every conversation, every relationship. The gap between powerful people and everyone else is not money. It's not access. Not initially. It's awareness. Awareness of the systems running beneath every human interaction, and the willingness to engage with them honestly instead of pretending they don't exist. Most people pretend because seeing clearly is uncomfortable. It means taking responsibility. It means you can no longer claim you didn't know, but you know now. And that changes something, not everything, not overnight. But here's what I'll leave you with, and this is the part I want you to think about long after this video ends. Dark psychology doesn't disappear when you understand it. The framing doesn't stop. The emotional leverage doesn't stop. The identity engineering doesn't stop. The only thing that changes is whether you're the one deciding what to do about it. That's the difference between being moved and moving. That's the difference between living in someone else's story and writing your own. The people who built real power, the ones worth studying, they all understood one thing that the masses don't. The world is not designed to make you powerful. It is designed to make you useful to someone else's power. The moment you understand that, really understand it, in your bones, is the moment you start building something of your own. That's the work. And if you're serious about doing that work, the next video you need to watch is already uploaded. Because what we covered today is the psychology behind power. In the next one, we go into the specific behavioral patterns, the ones used by the most influential people in history, and how you can start developing them. If you're not subscribed, fix that. Drop a comment below. Tell me, which of the three mechanisms hit different for you? Framing, emotional leverage, or identity?